Hi, Lesley. Hi, Paolo. Paolo, welcome. Congratulations and welcome to the Asia Society family. I know they sent us the profiles and, I've known you since Rare, but maybe you can tell us about kami ni Lesley about, your recent work and, where you are now.
Well, first, thank you for the welcome. Really looking forward to joining the society. I'm currently the Chief Program Officer for Global Fishing Watch. We are a nonprofit organization that was started by 3 organizations, namely SkyTruth, Oceana, and Google. And our intent is to use transparency and technology to advance ocean governance. So basically what we do is we do satellite imaging, AI, machine learning to understand human activity at sea. So one of our biggest challenges in ocean management is that you can't manage what you don't know or what you can't measure. In effect, we're trying to show what's happening in the oceans and help inform governments and other stakeholders for it. You might hear my kid in the background as he's about to leave for daycare. but yes, so that's what I do. Before that, I was with Rare. So we're an environmental organization that has been helping coastal communities in terms of better fisheries management. I was with them for about 8 years before I joined and moved here in Berlin. Yep. And how about you, Greg and Lesley?
So I'm with Exchange. I'm a director at Exchange. We are an impact investor and incubator. We work with early stage social enterprises. And though we started as sector agnostic, obviously climate change is now the climate crisis. And that's really one of our areas of focus now, trying to see how we can support on the entrepreneurship side. So obviously there are different ways to tackle it, right? Like with Lesley in terms of legal and NGO work. So for us, we're looking to support entrepreneurs who are solving for climate change. So we have had several engagements, with climate change and adaptation. So some like Tuklas in terms of Tuklas did this innovation program for disaster risk and reduction management. So some high-tech solutions, early warning device, early warning for the whole community, ganyan. And some things like, in the evacuation center where everyone is all the families are all crowded. And so there was a social enterprise that devised, their background was in interior design. And so they devised this
design
like a divider so that the families could have privacy, ganyan. So that's one. And then we've done incubation for entrepreneurs working in plastic pollution. We've worked with WWF on a port project, how to manage the plastic waste. So that's why, Paolo, it was very interesting. One of them was also around data management and tagging and, looking to see where does this plastic come from and, from obviously tagging the larger FMCGs. And as you said, we can better manage what we know. So, I mean, that's a broad overview of some of the work that we've done in plastic. And then now looking at, refilling, maybe the upcoming EPR, Lesley, which I also want to talk to you about, maybe ask you a couple of questions about. But the IRR of the Extended Producer Responsibility Law and how we can, give it some teeth.
Yeah.
So that's me.
Very interesting yung work. But I have a question. How did you get into what you're doing before I'll share kung anong ginagawa ko? Did you just decide na you look at sustainability and entrepreneurship and si Paolo naman on oceans and transparency?
Actually, since college, parang this is something I knew I would do, development work, social development, innovation. But I didn't really know how to get into it until finally, maybe a couple of years later of me not doing development work. I was talking to a friend. She said, why don't you volunteer for an NGO? And you can figure out, do you like it? What's it like? So I went around looking. No one was actually looking for volunteers at the time. And then finally one one local NGO that was working in Paco and Pandacan in direct service. So yung mga ilalim ng tulay, really among the poorest of the poor, was looking for a livelihood and microfinance program manager. And yeah, that was my start.
Nice. Ikaw, Pao?
So I've been working for nonprofits since I graduated from college. So I've been very involved in community development work. So while I was in university, so volunteering a lot. I remember the turning point when I decided to join a nonprofit. And primarily kasi during that time, it wasn't such a fancy choice, right? To go to sustainability work or to development work. So it wasn't like a favorite innovators. But during that time, it wasn't. So it wasn't a favored choice. But I was volunteering for this juvenile delinquent place in Visayas. And then I was speaking to one of them. And I decided to ask, parang, of course, it was like an initial rapport. And then eventually, I just had to ask. I was very young back then. So he told me during that time that he committed a grave crime, which was he killed somebody.
Oh.
And at a very, very young age. And during that time, I kept asking myself why the country with so much talent and resources and natural resources continue to still live like this. So why are there always still stories like this and opportunities that are not given across all the sectors of our society? So that made me decide to actually move into the space of nonprofit. So I joined Gawad Kalinga, and that was like my first path. So I volunteered for several years, worked for them full-time for about a year. And then since then, I've been in the environmental, climate change, biodiversity space and working for the oceans. So that was my journey. But I'm sure like almost everybody has like those sort of like turning points when they decide I'm gonna put in my effort and energy into a singular thing. And in my case, it was working for nonprofits.
Nice,
Yep.
nice.
Nice.
Your story, Lesley. Your turn.
My turn. So I'm a lawyer by profession, pero I ventured into government. So I used to work at the Office of the President, time ni President Aquino. This was 2010 to late 2015. So currently, I'm with the World Bank, now based in Singapore. So later, I'll ask Paolo for mga tips kung saan maganda.
How long have you been in Singapore?
A year. So
Okay.
I'm doing disaster risk management. I'm a senior DRM specialist of the World Bank, covering now East Asia and the Pacific. So before that, I was in the Philippine office for 5 years. And people will be asking a lot of questions like, how is a lawyer, what is a lawyer doing in the space of disaster risk management? Because usually they see an engineer doing this type of work, right? Pero right now, I think it's more of the policy aspect in helping governments from different countries, national government, local government, finding a way to strengthen and work on preparedness for disasters, disaster response, rehabilitation and recovery, as well as prevention and mitigation. And part of the work that we are doing is also promoting resiliency and making sure that we also reduce the risk and make sure there's sustainability, and we consider also climate resilience. So a lot of things we're doing. And then the interesting part is you get to do not just the core disaster risk management aspect of the work. There's also financing. There's also branching out into the urban and tourism development sector. We're also doing marine plastics, and then a lot of environment and blue economy. So later on, maybe we can see where we find our commonalities and then how we can help each other also in what we do.
Yeah, and that's really one of the things that I like about Asia society. I mean, the people I meet here, because even if we're in different sectors, or in this case, we're in more or less the same sector, it's great, these great conversations to bounce off ideas and then seeing how we can collaborate. Just curious, Lesley. I mean, because you talked about policy, no, and that's one really lever that we're constantly looking at. Though we have said that policy is not really in our wheelhouse, but policy is a driver of wholesale behavior change. Have you seen that actually work? And in the case of governments, is that more? I guess, is there an imperative on their side, or is it more inertia? Curious lang. I don't know if this is on the record or yeah.
Yeah. So interesting you asked, because if I'm wearing my government hat, usually people in government, especially the national government, office of the president, the mindset has always been we draft guidelines, we draft issuances, executive orders, administrative orders, and we hope that people follow it, right? Yun yung mindset na gagawa, susundin ng mga tao. But the challenge there is we need to get people who are not just up there, right, in central government or in Malacanang or in the legislative branch, because we need people with experience so that the practical considerations, the challenges on the ground, people who will be affected by these policies gets a voice. They get consulted. So I think kailangan natin yun. While this is a major lever to be able to drive things, whether it's economic activity or it's part of enforcement because you want something done, kailangan natin to be more open. And that is where, when I joined the bank, I could see that. Because before, when you're up there, when you're so busy doing the day-to-day work, what you think you think is the best, parang this is the best alternative, this is the best option. And if you graduated from this school and you're a lawyer, you feel that you have the monopoly of knowledge. But the real challenge in getting the policies implemented and making sure we get what we want out of those policies and we get people to follow is to really try to address some of these challenges that your policy are looking at. And how do you bring in people, right, to buy in?
Both a bottom-up and a top-down approach.
Right. Yeah.
Paolo, parang you're gonna say
no, I was just
but
mostly because what I do is really government engagement and policy work. So I've been doing that for RARE and currently for Global Fishing Watch. Part of the things that we've been just doing is about this role of like policy diffusion, where we try to get like countries adopt certain policies as it relates to ocean management and ocean governance. So I'm just interested from Lesley's point of view of like you used to work for government, and I'm sure there are some decisions that are critically time sensitive. That while most governments really encourage and sort of embrace the practices of good governance in terms of participatory and being transparent and hold themselves accountable, there are decisions, especially maybe in the space of disaster risk, that you'll just really have to make quick decisions. Right? So how is it different from like a bank who's, of course, much more, who's responsive, but at the same time doesn't carry like the weight of immediate decisions, which governments actually most of the time have?
Strangely, you can see the parallelisms, World Bank or the banking, multilateral development bank and government, because the bank in itself is also a bureaucracy and an institution. It doesn't bear much weight in terms of if you decide on a certain policy, it doesn't mean that people die, right? When there is a major disaster and government doesn't act on it, or government will take a long time to respond. But I think to some extent, the work that we do in disaster risk management is also supporting governments. So as simple as, I'll take the example of the Philippines. So during Typhoon Odette, this was sometime December 16, December 17. So I got a phone call from the Department of Finance saying, we have an existing standby loan facility. There is a very strong typhoon. It was labeled as a super typhoon. And this is around last quarter, last few days of the year. So ubos yung budget. And they need a quick liquidity in terms of financing so that they can support the basic response and relief operations. So this standby loan facility is something that could be processed within 48 hours. That's the nature of the instrument. So it's $500 million, roughly around 25, 30 billion pesos. So when you picked up this phone, Christmas, holiday season, what we did was we prepared and canceled the Christmas break and had to work double time to make sure that we will respond to what government requested. So it might not carry the burden of people dying if we don't act as fast, but I think we owe it to our clients or counterparts in the government to also help. And ultimately, it's not just the government, but also the people who are affected at that time. So it's a different kind of challenge, but what lessens the burden and the responsibility, I think, is back in government as an undersecretary at the Office of the President, you're the direct line of fire, right? Galit yung president, galit yung secretary mo, ikaw yung kasunod. So there's a level of burden and responsibility versus when you're in the middle of the food chain or not so high up there in terms of the management hierarchy of the bank, then there's some window because there's somebody higher than you pa. But
that's an interesting perspective. Good to actually hear that the bank actually has people like you who have so much experience with regards to how it's actually really done from a national government perspective. I have a quick question to Greg on just what she actually introduced. So, and if you don't mind, Lesley, unless you have
Go ahead.
I think Greg mentioned about like the wave of like entrepreneurs. Did you see that build up? Like, was there like a momentum of entrepreneurs who started to do work around sustainability or climate change work, etc., and related to their core business ideas in the last few years? Because I mean, climate change has been there, right? So for many years, but it has also just picked up quite a lot. No, so part of my work before was to attend a lot of these climate change negotiations every year during the COPs. And then I think I remember I think it was in UK maybe 2 years ago when there was suddenly like a wave of like the private sector coming in and saying, we're going to help beat climate change. We're going to reduce all our emissions. Of course, there were very progressive ones in the past, but we haven't seen it like that where all of a sudden like MNCs, small enterprises, like medium enterprises just suddenly said that we're going to reduce our emissions and help in the work. So I just wanted to see from like the wave of entrepreneurs that you've seen, if that's something that has been evident as well over the last few years.
Yeah, to some extent, we've seen the space accelerating, and then some more than others. No? So within the spectrum, let's say solar, renewable energy, that's more mature and therefore more ready, more investment ready in that sense. And then there are really the frontier sectors like plastic waste, where that's only now emerging, like a roving MRF, for example. Yung mga ganyang innovations we're seeing, and we're keeping a watching brief over. No one investable yet on our side, on the plastic side, but we're also seeing, both upstream and downstream in terms of plastic, with refilling and the swapping model. But not enough. So having said that, it's been accelerating and people are interested in looking at the space. We're not seeing enough of also, entrepreneurs with a mindset of a more systems change approach and really a holistic approach. And even on the corporate side, we're seeing a lot of, let's say, plastic neutrality, carbon neutrality, but where is the real effort to reduce it? Right, rather than just offset with somebody who's already doing something. But we take what we can, and hopefully that accelerates. I mean, there's ESG also, which right now, at least for corporations, that's really more a compliance thing. And hopefully, with entrepreneurs, it's a little more challenging to be reporting on these things. So our interest really is who is out there with an entrepreneurial solution trying to solve these problems. And yeah, like I said, there's a lot. No, there's the greenhouse gases, there's the pollution, there's what else is interesting? Yeah, so on the disaster risk side, actually that group of interior designers, sayang they decided not to pursue. So we're also seeing a lot of this, no, parang especially people in science who are, for example, we were working with a scientist, he has a PhD in materials, nanoscience and material science. And he developed a solution, but doesn't necessarily want to be an entrepreneur. So that's a different skill set altogether. And so really we need more entrepreneurs to come up and say, because I mean, it's a risk, no? It's not easy to do. One of the challenges that we're facing is, number one, ease of doing business in the Philippines. It is hard to get in, registration and all that. It's hard while you're in business, compliance, filing. And then if you do close, it's hard to close a business. So all around, no? And then policies, let's say, for example, refilling, it's not yet, you can't get a license to operate from the FDA right now for refilling. You can do so if it's water, but for other things, you can't yet. So they're really in a frontier sector, in a sector where a lot of the value chain, the supply chain, and policies have not yet been developed. So it's really the brave and the bold who are entering the space. Yeah.
True. But Greg, follow up sa question ni Paolo, how are you seeing an uptake in terms of younger entrepreneurs? And kung wala pa, what are some of the things that we can do, I think, to increase this young people wanting to go into this field, and then also supporting sustainability, climate change, marine plastics?
Yeah, no, that's a very important question. So a lot of the ones that we're seeing are young, actually, because it's also the young who are more, to use the term, woke. They're more aware and they want to vote with their wallets. They want to really vote according to their values. And a lot of them end up starting these enterprises. But it's also a challenge when you're fresh out of college and you don't have necessarily the experience on, building a team and putting up systems. Because one thing also we're seeing is that it's different. A lot of them are bootstrapping, of course. That's in the beginning, no, but also not building for scale. So it's different how you build a mom and pop operation versus your build for an operation that you want or intend to scale. Iba yun, iba yung policies, iba yung basically everything, right? And so it would be good, to your second question, if there are mentors to help them along the way. They're always in need of technical assistance, from the, just the operations side, HR, legal. And then even within law, diba, there's tax law, there's labor law, there's IP. So they need all the support. And then, that high level where we come in as the investor, more strategic, helping them think through operational challenges. So yeah, how can we help? Let's start young, education-wise. Let's foster a culture of entrepreneurship, that it's okay. I mean, in the same way, Paolo, that you were saying, diba, na NGO work didn't used to be so sexy or fancy, diba? Yeah. Same for, although ngayon, social entrepreneurs, I think everyone now wants to be a social entrepreneur. Yeah. But before, I mean, the parents, diba, are like, oh, why don't you become a doctor or engineer or a lawyer, ganyan. And entrepreneurship wasn't really encouraged. So I think overall that mindset, the education, put that in place, financial management, and then in terms of the policies nga and, ease of doing business, I think that will be a big help, to name a few.
I do have to commend Exchange's work. You have been such a trailblazer in connecting really and building this whole ecosystem of not just entrepreneurs themselves, but really connecting them to the right advisors, to the mentors, those with experience and expertise to be able to help them in their business. And I think that's one of the things that I've seen so much with Greg's work, with Erica, who's also Asia 21, and also with with Rico, talagang it's like a whole ecosystem. Just like, you all know everybody operating in this space, whatever issue it is. I'm just surprised on how much sort of like network and it really has become such a ecosystem that you've built. And I think that's one of your biggest contributions.
Thank you. We
So
try.
it's not
We
like
try.
like a young entrepreneur just coming in very cold, right? They have like organizations like yourselves to actually help them move along that chain. So yeah.
Thank you. But also, of course, want to highlight the work of these other experts that we tap, that we go to. And I know we did some work with you also, no, for the stakeholder mapping. And yeah, hopefully we can continue to build that.
Yeah, that's one of the things, Lesley, that I do with Greg and Erica and Rico. If I need to know somebody, I just message them and say, do you know anybody working on this? And then they'll have like a whole directory and list of people that not just acquaintance, but really people that they have been involved with, which is just amazing. And I'm assuming that's also what Asia, I mean, I'm very new to the society, what also provides, no? So I've been traveling quite a lot, and then I've met like several people in quick message, like I'm here, land, etc. I mean, some of those didn't materialize, but I met somebody here in Berlin who's part of the class, who's like a entrepreneur, big sort of like company that's been in existence for 10 years, but they really do good work. And I'm assuming that's really what Asia 21 also tries to foster, no?
Right.
Able to connect and yeah. I think I just have like one insight before I lose this line of thought. I think both of you also operate in that where you're both providing equity or debt or loans or support, technical advice, grants, etc. to governments for the World Bank, and then for entrepreneurs for exchange.
Mm-hmm.
That was too obvious, but I just realized it. Like, we're both operating in that space. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe
capital is needed.
No, I definitely agree. Yeah. Maybe
actually,
casual...
to your sorry,
go
ahead.
No, go ahead.
No. Well, to your point, I wanted to ask Lesley something, and we're always talking about country commitments and the financing gap for climate change, and there's also talk of climate justice in terms of how can we get more countries. Is this also part of the work that you're doing? The country contributions. In terms of financing, kasi of course, there's technical assistance and all that, but all of this costs money and needs to be underwritten, right? So yeah.
I think it's crucial right now. We're talking about climate financing. It's sexy and there's so much money out there, globally, regionally. But for the Philippines, I think our challenge is how do we access those resources? And we cannot just all be railed up and chant and say, we deserve this, right? This is part of climate justice. We have to do our homework. We have to develop proposals. We have to make sure that we get our programs in place. So I think that's very basic. And for government, it would be good if government would be able to leverage on the science, the innovation, the technology, and the talent that is out there. So how can they get more people involved to support them? Because we all know that government resources, government manpower is not enough. And in terms of these innovation and technology, it's with civil society, it's with private sector, other organizations into this space. So how can we get more young people involved? So I think that's one. Second, I think raising awareness that climate financing is available and there are things that we can do, programs that we can support. And it's not just the World Bank. There's a lot of other organizations out there. It's also understanding what each organization needs, whether it's the Green Climate Fund or bilateral organizations with available resources, or developing some of these innovative financing instruments that could also be helpful in doing climate adaptation programs or climate mitigation activities. But again, I think we need more people who will do the fun, exciting uh, and innovative ways instead of the usual uh, programs that we have.
Maybe
So,
just to add to Leslie's point, so we've done work in the past with RARE about climate financing as well.
mhm.
And we categorize, and basically in general, like financing for oceans, in our case, coastal communities. So we've done some initial work on that and realized that it's not just necessarily about the source or potentially like the access, but it's also like the deployment, right? So it's like a whole chain of like being able to identify that, where the money's coming from, the purpose of that money, because like different, and I'm sure Leslie is much more familiar with this, but different resources play a different role, right? So it could de-risk, it could sustain, it could flood in private capital, etc. So depending on the purpose of that resource. And then again, to Leslie's point about like accessing, one of the things that we've tried to do is help governments, local governments in the Philippines, access climate finance. So there's like People Survival Fund
Yeah.
in the country that's really a designated fund, which is quite a lot. But at the same time, like in bilateral or multilateral, like the Green Climate Fund, as you've mentioned, there's another multilateral mechanism called the Global Environment Facility, or the CHEF, which is like the money designated for biodiversity, but they have like a whole stream of climate change already now. So it's that accessibility, and then also really that deployment. Because one of the things that we've also seen is that even once they're successfully tap the resource, that whole deployment and that absorptive capacity of communities and governments to channel the resources and to actually implement and make use of it is also like a challenge. So that's like a whole sort of like spectrum of things. And just on innovative financing, right? So we've done, and Greg knows about this as well, we've done like an impact investment for fisheries in itself. We've started like a blended finance, didn't materialize, but we tried to do like a blended finance vehicle in the Philippines and in Indonesia in the past. So there's a lot of like creative ways. Part of my work has always been trying to link these financing and public funding channeled through banks, development banks, or aid agencies, support public policy priorities. And maybe to connect to what Greg has mentioned, right? So a country commits to their NDCs, or their nationally determined contributions. And in essence, like Green Climate Fund or others would need to facilitate and finance the achievements of all these NDCs. And I think that's still an ongoing and challenge. Related to our work, SDG 14, so which is on water. So we've done like an initial analysis, like less than 1% of the total funding goes to SDG 14. So that's really still space. While it's very, very obvious that oceans take a lot of the weight and challenge of climate change. Ocean acidification, you have like fish stocks moving because of higher temperature. At the same time, it's also one of the biggest carbon sinks in the world.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So parang and all these ecosystems of mangroves, of seagrass, of coral reefs, right, doing its role for climate change, but in essence, it's still getting the least funding. And that's one of the things that we're trying to also demonstrate, right? The importance of oceans in climate conversations. And it has picked up over the last few years with Ocean Climate Nexus. I mean, a lot of like the NDCs, or the national adaptation plans of governments, now reflect oceans, but still a long way to go.
Yeah, even
the point of financing.
And even with disaster, diba? I mean, with the rising ocean levels and all that, I mean, it really affects everything.
True.
I'm surprised to hear 1%.
Yeah.
It's less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
1%.
Wow.
Considering na ganito yung mga challenges that you guys are facing, di ba? So much effort is put in with your respective organizations, and then in terms of, how do you say, overall impact, you feel this, di ba? Even if we push hard, how do you maintain your sanity? That's
a good question.
Paano question ito? Where do you turn to when you get so frustrated, even if you're doing all out in your respective organizations? Do you also turn to colleagues from Asia Society do some cocktails or beer session?
Kulang pa, kulang. We should do more of that in Asia Society. But yeah, pwede rin. You celebrate the wins. And even if it's not yet where it needs to be, just watching to see, are things changing? Are at least things moving forward? We want to get to a point where we're actually moving the needle. And I think that's one of the biggest points of frustration. Na parang it's so slow, and climate change, we don't have the time, right? We don't have the luxury of time. And then I guess more on a personal level, just connecting with friends, family, unplugging. Although hirap, because even if you take a break, when you come back, there's so much work. Then you end up working just as hard anyway. So, I mean, it's an ongoing challenge to find the balance. Kayo?
Ikaw, Pao?
I think Greg made a good point. You take the win, right? So whatever form that may take. So if it's like a simple engagement with the government, or you get to see like products of your work, ganyan. On a personal basis, I mean, Berlin is a great city for young people. In Singapore, I remember doing food trip. So that's what I'm doing here. But I've gained so much weight since I joined this new organization. Off the record.
Di naman halata.
Yeah, but I mean, take the win and then try to again recalibrate. I'm sure I'm sure you both know this. It's very hard, especially when you engage with governments in itself. Kasi you see some of the policies you support directly, some others you really don't. And you just also need to take a step back and just support really governments on the right policies, right? Or if not, try to inform and influence them to take different paths if that's the case. But again, to Lesley's point, there's so many factors that you consider once you actually sit in that position. I've never been in government, so I don't know as much, but I'm sure that's really how it plays out.
Yeah.
Ikaw, Lesley, what have you learned in Singapore then? What's like the best thing to do in Singapore?
Food trip also.
Food trip.
Yeah.
Food trip. And then I also do a little hiking, but I'm often home for part of the work, monitoring and managing the Philippine program also. So what I do, I pick up the phone and then gather some friends like Asia Society friends, sila Jeff, sila Doris, minsan tatawag si Ching, or nandyan sila Joy, or may activity ang Asia Society. So you get a chance to vent in a safe space, but you also get a better perspective. So I think an opportunity to also take a step back. The difference, I think, sa DRM work is ups and downs, ebbs and flows. Kasi when there's a major disaster, adrenaline rush, ang daming kailangan gawin. And then, napepent up yung frustration because sometimes things are moving so slow, or there are a lot of things that don't go right or go to the direction that you want them to go. And you see people suffering, right? So, frustrating. But then, you also see friends. You also see people that who are working in different organizations. Lucky for me, because during Typhoon Yolanda, this was around 2013, I was very new to Asia Society then, 2011, 2012 batch. And you see a lot of people from Asia Society organizing a Typhoon Yolanda major event. And after that major event, you get to meet people doing their own little things in their respective organizations, supporting government also. So I drew strength from those experiences and those activities. And then na it's a safe space to complain to them about what's happening in government. And then you get to reset also and recharge. So it was a good opportunity. And I think right now, based on what you guys mentioned, take the quick wins and celebrate the small victories. And then once in a while, eat and drink.
Eat and drink. Yes.
But I like that point, that safe space that Asia society could really provide, and really just surrounding yourself with kindred spirits, I guess, because it is especially for the type of work that we have all decided to pursue our careers around, or really power through our lives to focus on. Parang you really need like a community. I think I have like a chat with several of like the Asia 21 as well. And we have a chat group named Stay Alive.
Stay alive.
Rico coined before. It's like, just stay alive over the next few years. That's like your mantra. And just contribute as much as you can at this point.
That's true. But, yeah. Stay alive. Stay sane.
Stay safe.
True.
Yeah, I think, that safe space and knowing that you're not alone. Knowing that others are going through challenges also, and that there are other good people doing the work that you're doing, or even if it's a different sector, but basically that there are other people, there are others. We're not just the crazy ones. Or maybe we all are the crazy ones.
Maybe Asia society related question. What's one of the most memorable experiences you've had over the course of a decade for both of you?
Wow.
I'm sure there's a lot.
There was an intimate conversation for Asia society lang. It wasn't open to the public. And we talked about education. So it was a great safe space where, we could just bounce off ideas. So it was really a mix. May venting, merong bouncing off ideas, merong what do you think of this? And really bringing different minds together to see how we can address that. And that was, if I remember, it was at the end of the day for me. And parang I felt at the end of that conversation, what a great way to end the day. With these like-minded people and this uplifting, frustrating. The conversation itself was not frustrating, but the conversation, what we talked about was frustrating, but the conversation was uplifting. And I think, in general, that's what Asia society and coming together does, no? And like you said, Paolo, it's hard to choose, no? And then another one, it's not so, I guess, major, but when I attended AVPN, I reached out to Joy, who then reached out to Sanjeev, I think, in the US office, and then he connected us. He connected me with several Asia Society fellows who were in Indonesia and also attending AVPN, and we just got together during the breaks, and we found a lot of things in common. So that was really nice.
So mine was Asia 21 Philippines first. This was a program, I think 2-3 day program, and we have roommates at that time. So we were billeted in one of these facilities, Meralco. My roommate was Doris Dumlao. I didn't know Doris at that time. So, sabi ko, Dor, gisingin mo ako ha, after mo maligo. And then, sabi ni Doris, sige. So, when she's done, ginising daw niya ako. But I couldn't remember na ginising niya ako. So, I ended up attending the session very late. When I entered the room, there was Senator Bam Aquino and I think Maria Rez. And then when I entered the room, in-announced ni Bam na let's all welcome the very late Lesley Cordero. I thought she had my back, right? But it was a fun week on and break the ice. And from that time on, parang it's nice to rely on Doris for several things. Even if she's doing media and I'm doing other things, there's always that parang friendship as well as camaraderie because of that. What happened? Fast forward when we went to India because we had our conference in India at that time. Mm-hmm. So, okay na kami ni Doris. Then we started bonding with other people. Nandun sila Jeff Tarayaw ng One Meralco Foundation. And I knew Jeff from another conference. It was Ayala Young Leaders. But when we went there, buddy. So we cut a few sessions. And then we drove 4 hours to Agra for Taj Mahal. And another 4 hours back. So I think these are good experiences. You don't just talk about work stuff. You also enjoy sightseeing, bonding, knowing and getting to know the family, friends of colleagues or batchmates. A few years after, when there's a major disaster, you know that you can pick up the phone. And some of these people will be there to help government, to help in the kind of work that you do. And it all started with those memorable and fun stuff, kahit nakakahiya.
You weren't caught when you left for 8 hours or more.
Nagpaalam kami. So when we came back, Ching was so mad. And we were explaining that we're leaving because others are extending. So are you extending sa Tokyo?
I've been traveling a lot for work, so I might just extend for like half a day, and that's my.
Okay, that's an extension.
Okay. So we didn't get to extend; the others extended. So it was a good excuse.
Kami rin, we extended with Ivan, Myrish, a couple of us. We extended. Yeah, we went to Nara.
Nice.
And Kyoto.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You also had it in Tokyo back then.
Yes. So I would have loved India also.
Yeah. Ours was a very batch. I think sila Anya, sila Doris, they had a car accident on their way to Taj. Yeah. So
but they went after.
They went after, so they extended. Kami tumakas.
Dapat pala sa inyo na lang sila sumama.
Oo.
Yeah, all of a sudden, kasi this year, parang everything has opened up. So all the major negotiations, conferences, so we've been traveling so much, which is really bad for carbon footprint.
Yes.
So parang that's like a personal dilemma, but at the same time, okay, you also need to make that trip. So
yes.
So some of our colleagues actually do like all these like long journey train rides, 12 hours, 16 hours, ganyan, because they're just also used to that lifestyle that they can work, diba? They can take calls.
Right.
Sabi ko, hindi pa ako sanay sa ganun. but eventually, yeah.
I think that would be nice, like a train ride, and that's a scenic route, diba?
Well,
you can work nga, but yeah, to each his own. Ubos lang yung araw mo. Yeah. What's the dream? We've been working 10 plus years, 15 pa nga. And parang we've all said that the work is slow, but there are some wins. But, parang looking forward naman. What is the dream for you, Lesley and Paolo? For what the space will look like, or the work that you're doing, what will it look like?
In the space of disaster risk management, especially in the region, important na there will come a time, maybe 10 years from now, hopefully 10 years from now and not 20, that the region will no longer need the World Bank in terms of disaster risk management, the response aspect, that we have developed already enough systems in place, enough capacity with our people and communities to be resilient and to no longer need the bank and let the bank do other things and support the country in a different way. At a personal level, I think it would be good for me if I would be able to find a few people to train, to mentor, so that when I leave the space, there will be younger people who would be taking it on, and you know that you're leaving it in better hands, right? And that's a challenge, because how do we get more people involved in the space, and how do we also link these people to some opportunities so they can also learn as fast as they can, so that they can also network and they can also be part of a group of organization who is willing to help them when there are things that they will be doing in the space of disaster risk management, sustainability, and climate resilience. So that's the dream, and hopefully, not only in this space, but also in your respective sectors pala.
Love it. It's a BHAG. 10 years. 10 years and we don't need world bank.
Retire.
Ako parang there's no one ultimate dream. I think there's many guideposts and things that we could strive for. Like one of them is really aiming that oceans and coastal communities play a central role in a lot of like key conversations in the environment. And that's going to take a while. There's also, of course, like the dream of like below 1.5 degrees change, implementation of NDC. So there's so many guideposts that you could aim for. And maybe the dream is really just being able to find like that whole community that could be with you, together with you in achieving any of those. So there's a lot of work to be done. So people, as long as you're surrounded with like-minded and kindred spirits, also really passionate to move that forward, regardless of like what that end direction will look like. Make that journey worth it.
Yeah. For me, it's similar. Like really, sorry.
Yours.
Yeah. Like a robust ecosystem where everyone has come together. So like you were saying, Paolo, parang we've really been working on that. We can't say yet it's robust, but hopefully that all comes together. And I don't know if you've been following, the tech scene in the Philippines. Parang in many conversations, we're not part of the conversation. We're not in the radar. A lot of international conferences, when they talk about Southeast Asia, that's Indonesia, Vietnam. Philippines, not so much, no? Hindi na pag-uusapan. And so in terms of attracting capital, that kind of, we're getting some attention on the tech side, on the commercial side, and hopefully we see that same acceleration in the impact space. We're also working to develop more angel investors, because it's the angel investor that really comes in early, takes the risk. It's not a matter of patient capital it's just a matter of time when your money comes back. This one is you can really lose it. But they're the ones who are underwriting the innovations and the experimentation. So we really do need more of that. And that's the dream. Now, of course, more entrepreneurs, but also more investors so that we can define and develop the business models that will really scale.
Well, you both are inspiring. Thank you for the time.
This has been great. And to the audience, I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. And thank you. Thank you for spending the last hour with us.
Thank you both. Thank you for everyone who watched this.
Thank you.